Hey everybody, and welcome to another Darkest Dungeon mod overview. My name is ElementFive, and tonight we're taking a look at the Fool. The Fool is a brand new modded class, currently in version 1.1, with artwork and development by Muscarine, development and coding by Claire de Lune, with writing by Rakid, and additional artwork by EO. Now, while streaming modded content for Darkest Dungeon over the last year, Claire de Lune and Muscarine immediately became two of my favorite people. They're both just immensely talented in terms of what they do within the Darkest Dungeon community and modding sphere. Muscarine obviously responsible for all of his modded classes, which are some of the most popular and most download modded classes on the Steam Workshop. And of course, Claire de Lune, who was known for all of the work she did behind Claire's collection of curiosities, her own Trinket mod, which has been a phenomenal success and a lot of fun. Claire also had a hand in the development and production of the most recent official Darkest Dungeon DLC, Color of Madness, and she leads the way on a huge communal project called Moonlit Dungeon, which is an upcoming overhaul mod for Darkest Dungeon, which is just going to be absolutely insane, which adds new enemies, effects, an entirely new dungeon experience, is one of the more highly anticipated things coming in the DD sphere, and includes cooperation and involvement from Muscarine and Marvin Sayo and all kinds of different big names in the DD community. So when they got together and joined forces on a new class mod, which was also to be Muscarine's send-off and last modded class, the expectations were high. I knew that this was going to be a project that is something very, very special, something different and very unique, something that brings the kind of extremely high-quality artistic talent that Muscarine brings to his classes, but also the kind of innovative and really super polished work that Claire does in everything that she's done for Pitch Black Dungeon and that is coming to Moonlit Dungeon, etc. And having said that, the Fool really delivers. It is, in my experience so far, something truly unique to this game. It is technically a modded class, but personally, thus far, I tend to think of this as a very unique experience. So what do I mean by a completely unique experience then? Well, let's just take a look at some of the facts. You only get one Fool class in your entire playthrough. You do not get her in the stagecoach. In fact, you receive a Fool from a high chance town event that will trigger after a week reset, and that is the only way that you get one of them. She is technically a transformation class, but she works very separately, very differently than other transformation classes. She is conceptually lost sort of in her own realm until you use one of her abilities, Whale, and open the 9th gate. Once you have opened the 9th gate, you've essentially brought her into this realm, and now you can use her kit. By bringing her into the 9th gate, you also enact her affliction, which is sort of a hybrid virtue / affliction, which makes her largely out of your control most of the time. The Fool also has her own flashback events, which allow you to get access to her trinkets, not unlike the shield breakers in a certain respect. They also come with unique background artwork and character models. She is also, for the most part, unkillable. Now, you can actually kill her using her unique provision that she comes with, or in respect to certain boss mechanics, in which case, if she does die, then you can, of course, revive her should you get a revival town event that would allow you to resurrect fallen heroes, but you only get one of her, and she is basically unkillable. What that means is, if you allow her to hit Death's Door and or Heart Attack, she is going to stress nuke your party. So even though she sounds unkillable, there's actually a massive trade-off to allowing her to get to Death's Door. And we're going to get into more of this detail, but you can see just off the bat here that this is something very different and very unique and creative compared to all of the other modded classes that we tend to see in the DD sphere. Now, the description for the Fool is as follows. Washed ashore the Hamlet coast, the Fool is lost in a haze, impossible to communicate with. Impaled by a spear to a small corpse, by some strange, indefeasible ritual, she desires only for the child's salvation. She wants to free the poor, unknown little wretched soul, and she will die trying again and again, and it will never be done. Muscarine's interpretation of the universe that the Hamlet for Darkest Dungeon exists in is something that I find really interesting. Every one of his characters comes with a deeper symbolism about something about life and loss and love, the experience of being human. Now, conceptually, the Fool is actually inspired by a mix of different mythos. The Irish Banshee, the myth of Orphe and Eurydice, the myth of Persephone, and Greek hell in general. Now, in the game, you can see that she's carrying the corpse of a child to be reborn in the depths of the Darkest Dungeon, at the expanse of her own soul. But in fact, she's actually carrying her own dead childhood. She's stuck in a permanent attempt to revive it again. And since her child self is dead, she's nothing but a damned sad husk of misery. In many ways, this is really a deeper symbolism about trying to escape the inevitability of change, of leaving yourself behind, and facing death in general. Now, before we jump into her abilities and really break down how she works, let's just take a little snapshot here of her stats. She starts with max HP 32. That is a high HP pool to start here, and that is just mechanically purposed because of the way she works. So we'll talk about that in a second. But you'll also notice she has no dodge, no prot, no speed, no accuracy, and a decent damage output. The rest of her resistances are not that interesting. Low disease, low debuff and trap, decent stun resist, decent blight resist. But for the most part, what you're really feeling with this character is a lot of power and flexibility, more so than most of Muscarine's other modded classes. She fits well in other groups. She does a good job reaching most ranks, and she can do a really high amount of damage and have tremendous output. But that comes at the cost of the fact that she is super freaking slow. Okay, extremely slow. And then when you do get to use her, you're going to be afflicting her, which makes her, for the most part, out of your control 50% of the time. So that is the trade-off. She is extremely slow and, for the most part, unable to be communicated with. You don't really have control over her a lot of the time, but when she does act and you do have control, she can be devastatingly powerful. Now, before we take a detailed look at all of her abilities, let's just first look at a broader view of how she works, okay? If we take a look at her abilities up here, we can see we have one opener and then the rest of her kit. And that is how she works as a transformation class. Conceptually, the Fool is lost. She is in her own realm, and she starts combat cloaked. In order to access her kit and bring her into this realm and make her usable, you must first open with Whale. This is her opener, and this is her transformation ability. Whale is usable in rank 2, 3, or 4, and we have this big red disclaimer here. Do not unequip this skill. If Claire and Musk could have permanently locked in this ability, I think they would have, but because they can't, instead we get this big disclaimer here because in order to use the Fool, you have to open with this ability first. Now, by using Whale, what you're going to do is blight the enemy team with a 3/1 at level 1. Then you're going to suffer 3 HP damage and bring her down from full health, which is an important key that we'll talk about in a second. It de-stealths her and brings her into this realm, and then it forces her to affliction. It forces the opening of the 9th gate, which will allow access to the rest of her kit. There's one more important piece to this, which is that on battle end, she gets a full recovery. So she will remove all diseases, including Crimson Curse. She will remove all stress, and she will full heal. So you will start combating cloaked, then you will open with Whale. That will blight the enemy team, de-stealth her, take a little bit of damage, open up her affliction, and now you have access to the rest of her kit.
Madness. Sublimity of the intelligence. Or so it has been said.
Now, before we go over each individual ability here, there's a few consistencies that are worth pointing out. First of all, every single one of her abilities that she has in her kit is usable in any position except for rank 1. She's completely flexible and usable in rank 2, 3, or 4, but you cannot use her in rank 1, and that is true for all of her abilities. Also, important to note with all of her combat abilities is this down here. Other heroes, blight 60% base chance 1/2. So part of the drawback to her power and flexibility is the liability that she is. The fact that you have a 60% base chance at Apprentice to blight the rest of your team. Now, in general, you're not going to see this in play too often. Unless a character really has very low blight resist, this doesn't have that much of a likelihood of actually blighting your party. But it is something to consider, and in certain moments, this is part of her liability. This is part of the drawback of her power and flexibility. Now, once you have opened the 9th gate, the first skill that you have access to is Downpour. Okay, Downpour, again, usable in any rank except for 1, is a melee attack with a 90% base chance at level 1 to blight the first 3 enemies with a 2/3. It debuffs them -6 accuracy and -6% crit. It also has a damage modifier of doing -40, 50, and 60% respectively to positions 1, 2, and 3. So depending on the position of the enemy, you will actually hit them harder. So essentially, Downpour is a strong attack which hits the first 3 enemies, has a chance to blight them, and comes with some powerful debuffs.
Continue the onslaught. Destroy them all.
So next in her kit then is Weeping Song. Weeping Song, again usable in any position but rank 1. It targets both rank 2 and rank 4. You will hit enemies both in 2 and 4. It is a melee attack with a damage modifier -67%. It is a 100% blight base chance for 2/3. It debuffs the enemy plus 12 damage received. And then this is the interesting thing about this. It has a 50% chance to stealth other heroes in your group for 1 round. So Weeping Song is an interesting ability because, again, it hits rank 2 and 4, it is a damage received debuff plus blight, but then it has this coin flip at the end to potentially stealth the rest of your team for 1 round. The idea behind this is to add one of her attacks, which is sort of a support mechanic. And conceptually, this is basically her bringing the other heroes, the other companions, into her lost realm for a turn. And in the clip that I have that demonstrates this, I actually have one instance where I'm in control of her and can actually use this, and then the other instance is she doing it on herself as a result of her affliction. Next then in her kit is Burrowing. Burrowing is a melee attack that targets the front 3 enemies. At level 1, it has a 90% base chance to blight the first 3 enemies 2/3, but comes with a knockback 1 and does different damage depending on what position the enemies are in. So similar to Downpour then, that also hits the front 3 enemies. Downpour is your debuff mechanic. Burrowing is your knockback. Burrowing will also do higher damage to the frontline enemies, but really is purposed to be a means to reach the backline in certain dungeons, whereas Downpour is really a means to debuff powerful, hard-hitting enemies. Next in the Fool's Kit is First Circle. First Circle is only usable once per battle, and it is a full group buff. It buffs the group for 33% blight duration when applied, 12% damage versus blighted, and a plus 6% crit chance if a hero is afflicted. So this is a powerful buff for blight group synergy, right? If you're bringing a plague doctor, you're running the cove or the ruins, and you're doing a lot of blight damage, first circle is definitely worthwhile in terms of having some sort of utility and support to bring to a group. Buffing 33% blight duration when you apply a blight is pretty powerful, plus 12% damage versus blighted, and then obviously extra crit if a hero is afflicted doesn't hurt. And you'll see in the clip that I set up here that I actually use this to buff the group, and then I will use a blight attack with another companion, which will land for a heavier duration than normal. So then next is Fifth Circle. Fifth Circle is a random target melee attack. You do not choose who to attack this with. It bypasses guard, bypasses stealth. It has a 100% chance at level 1 to blight for 4/3, which is a considerable blight hit. And then this interesting piece down here, you get plus 20, 30, and 40% damage and blight chance, as well as plus 5 and 10% crit chance if her stress levels are at certain numbers. Assuming she's up to 180% stress, you're going to get plus 40% damage and blight chance, as well as plus 10% crit.
Executed with impunity.
So then last but not least in the Fool's Kit is Banshee. Banshee can only be used once per battle. It targets all enemies. It is a ranged attack that has a 110% chance at level 1 to stun all enemies. It also stealths all enemies for 1 round. And it buffs all enemies for minus 100% damage received. So essentially what you are doing here is you are using the Banshee's Wail to put the enemy team in stasis, okay? You are essentially bringing them into the lost realm that the Fool exists in. You are stunning them so they can't have any action. You are stealthing them so they are not targetable, but you are also giving them minus 100% damage received so they take no damage. You're basically just phasing out the enemy team for a round so that you can have a respite round. You can completely focus on whatever kind of catch-up you want to do in your own team. Consequently, because this lasts for 1 round and enemies come out of this stasis mode one at a time, it also puts you in a position to sort of focus fire one enemy at a time as it comes out. You don't have a ton of control over this because, again, speed is a die roll determinant. So there is that aspect, but this is a really freaking neat ability. And I have to applaud Claire and Musk for doing something, for taking a risk and making something that seems just completely out there. The idea that you can just put the enemy team in stasis and then focus on yourself for a second is a lot more attractive to me than, say, getting away with stalling against one enemy at the end of combat. It's different, and it's pretty cool. So now that we've gone over her individual abilities, let's talk about ways to build her and a few other very important things to take into consideration with this class, okay? So the first is, obviously, when you open with Wail as your opener, you come out of stealth, you blight the enemy party, it's super, super slow, you're going to stress her out to affliction, and then at the end of combat, you're going to completely reset her and bring her back to cloak and full heal and no stress, etc. So it would seem like this class is, because she has that full recovery at the end of battle, makes her just an amazing tank for both stress and damage. In reality, though, the Fool is a balancing act. If she hits Heart Attack, and therefore, or if she hits Death's Door, she will stress nuke the entire party and reset herself. So it's important to really take that into consideration. On the surface, you might think to yourself, well, she's just going to reset after battle, so I don't need to heal her. she can just tank all this damage, she can tank all this stress. And for the most part, that is kind of true. But if she hits Death's Door, or if she hits Heart Attack and thus goes to Death's Door, she's going to stress nuke your party for a massive amount of stress. So you actually have to manage her. This is also true if you allow her to get to full health. Okay, this is why Whale comes with a suffer 3 HP damage. If you accidentally or by some purpose result in full healing her, she gets lost again and goes back to stealth. But you've already used Whale. So in order to bring her back to the realm, you've got to use Whale again, and that is going to force a Heart Attack, and which will bring her to Death's Door and hit your group with the stress nuke anyway. So you have to, again, the balancing act then, in summary, is about keeping her away from Death's Door and away from full health, but also away from Heart Attack. Now, in terms of useful builds then, because you're using Whale as your mandatory opener, then you essentially have access to 3 other abilities as her active kit. And choosing those abilities is really situational in most cases. So as an example, you could definitely take Downpour if you're going to be fighting against enemies that doesn't really matter what their positioning is, but they do a lot of damage. They have high crit. So enemies in the Cove or enemies in the Color of Madness and Endless modes, right? Downpour is pretty useful to debuff the enemies for minus accuracy and crit chance. However, if instead you are in, say, the Weald or the Ruins and knockback is far more virtuous, it's far more useful, then definitely Burrowing is what you want to use instead of Downpour. These are basically redundant abilities because they do roughly the same damage to the same positions. It's just that Downpour comes with the debuff of accuracy and crit, and then Burrowing comes with knockback. So assuming you've selected one of these, you could also take Weeping Song and have just another high damage attack that adds a little bit of support utility to your class with that 50% chance to stealth. So it's really up to you when you want to use that. This also is one of her only ways to really hit rank 4. So if hitting the backline is important, then this is probably a consideration. Equipping and using First Circle is an obvious consideration if you're bringing Blight groups. So if you're going into the Cove or you're going into the Ruins and you're playing with a Blight party, First Circle is a great consideration because you're going to obviously buff all of their output. The 33% Blight duration when applied, which is significant damage increase, and then the damage done versus Blighted doesn't hurt to have plus 6% crit if afflicted heroes. So yeah, an obvious take along for Blight synergy. Fifth Circle then is kind of an interesting filler if you're dealing with a lot of guard and stealthed enemies, or if you just don't really care about what you're attacking and you just want to hit something super, super hard. Fifth Circle then is probably decent for boss fights in certain respects. And then you have, the utility that comes with Banshee. Are you concerned with the performance of your group not being able to catch up, and you need that respite round? You need the ability, the utility to just take the enemy team and phase them out of combat, and then just take a breather and completely heal, do whatever you can to catch up in your group, and then focus things as they come out of phasing, essentially. Now, in terms of her camping skill, she has Bainside. That is all she has for camping utility. It is a free ability, so there's basically no reason not to use it. It produces a Death Whistle, which we'll talk about in a second, and it buffs all companions for plus 15% damage if afflicted. So again, just a nice free buff to take in case you have an afflicted companion. Note that obviously does not apply to herself because it's companions. She's always afflicted anyway once you open with Whale. But this is the important piece here that we have not talked about yet, which is the Death Whistle. As of 1.1, this is a new provision that she has that she starts with every dungeon, and you can produce it every time you camp and use Bainside. Now, the Death Whistle is literally a free provision to kill your entire team, okay? There's no trick to this. It says so in the tooltip. This will kill your entire team. The purpose of the Death Whistle, then, is to prevent you from ever being stuck in what's called a soft lock, okay? So think about this for a second. You are up against, say, the Shrieker or a certain boss fight, and you fail, okay? Every hero dies for one reason or another, except for the Fool, who is unkillable. That means that all positions open and the Fool automatically slides into position 1. All of her abilities are not usable in position 1. So in a sense, you are soft locked now. You can't do anything and the boss can't do anything because you don't have any actions in position 1. Therefore, the death whistle is your way out of that scenario. It forces the death of the otherwise immortal Fool. Again, you don't get another Fool, but you could revive her should you get a revival town event. But that is its purpose. And you can definitely ditch it when you start a dungeon and then get one later when you camp, and that is why it is added into Baneside. But just know that that's what it's there for. It is literally there just as a means of escape in case your group dies and you are soft locked and have no control because she is in position 1. Now, when it comes to trinketing the Fool, you can definitely make it through her flashback events and get access to her trinkets, which are going to improve her efficacy for her abilities, right? Blight, stun, and move chance, etc. But what Muscarine told me on stream the other day was just give her anything that's going to enhance her damage output. So give her plus damage, plus crit, plus speed, etc. And don't worry about the stress and that stuff. So therefore, I think what I've basically been giving her is stuff like the Ancestor's Candle, Dismas's Head, plus damage at the cost of, and speed and dodge at the cost of stress, etc. And that makes sense to me because, again, super powerful, super versatile, and for the most part immortal, but that comes at the cost of the fact that she is slow as hell and out of your control. So you might as well take advantage of those facts and just ramp her damage as hard and as high as you can, and just make sure that you're not allowing her to full heal, heart attack, or death's door. As long as you do those things, you should be good to go by trinketing her to just improve her overall output. So you're going to bring her in your groups. She's going to fit in a lot of different ways. She's going to do good damage, but a lot of the time she's going to do it on her own, out of your control, and you have to manage her. It's a really unique and beautiful concept. Congratulations to Claire and Musk for making something that is completely out there and really, really beautiful and a lot of fun. Now, thankfully, the Fool is a complete package mod. All of the extras and stuff that come with her come with a single mod download, so I'll have that file linked to Steam in the information below the video as well. If you have any questions about how to play the Fool, please feel free to let me know in the comments section below. I hope you've enjoyed this brief overview of the Fool. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.